So, Colonel, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every couple of months, Scully. Reviewing and playing some video games.
It's Fancy and the Skull. It's Fancy and the Skull. Critiquing some good games and ones that are dull. Spreading praise and scorn across 14 platforms. It's Fancy and the Skull. Skull, 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 skull.
But that's not how you double dragon!
Back in part 1, it was pretty much a summary on how the PlayStation 2 was a commercial juggernaut that pushed video games into the mainstream for the foreseeable future. So, no doubt, it was a very cultural impacting console at the time of its release. But how influential was it? Now it's time to take a look at PSM's The Next Level article to look at how they feel that it would change the way that games are approached, developed, and played. Now, while some of these forecasts are legit laugh-out-loud funny, a few of the takes were some of the stuff that I'd been wishing for in some genres, like artificial intelligence in sports games. What can make racing games better? With the emotion engine powering the computer racers, you may not even need to race against human opponents. Each computer racer will have a unique identity. They could be aggressive or even mean and hold grudges from race to race. I don't know if that was a thing that ever happened, but I totally remember beef being hashed out in Road Rash in like 1995 on the 3DO. Or take Control for instance. The DualShock 2's analog buttons will have an immediate effect on the racing games. You'll be able to control your car's acceleration and braking speed by how hard you push the buttons. When you think about the incredible control this would give you around the turns, this could be the most revolutionary new feature the genre's ever seen. This was a step forward for a tampering into effective game feel. Analog buttons were pretty immersive thanks in part to DualShock technology. I don't feel like a lot of games capitalized on it though. So in-game advertising and DLC is scoffed at today, but then there's takes like this. You could purchase car upgrades that would give you the perfect competitive edge. Also, manufacturers such as Toyota, Ford, and BMW could hire people to create new vehicles that you could purchase and download to your game. This stuff gets shredded in game media today, and that amuses me.
So let me get this straight. 20 years ago, you gamers thought that it would be so cool to be able to purchase stuff with real money.
Yes.
And now 2 decades later, you want the practice to be stopped because it's supposed to be criminal.
That's right.
Can you explain to me why this is a thing?
Because we're dumb.
It's not a topic that I'll really go into exploring in depth on this channel. That's not really my primary focus, and my views on DLC and microtransactions have always been ambivalent. I believe that the consumer is up to buying whatever it is that they want to buy if they feel that it enhances their experience for the game, be it extra story chapters, extra costumes, or whatnot. But there are certain instances where I'll draw a line on it. If you're actually locking stages or progression in the game behind a paywall, like Marvel's Avengers, then that's just downright sinister and predatory and cynically greedy. But I have played my fair share of games like King of Fighters All-Stars, and I have paid real money for gyms just because I was either bored and just wanted to progress a little faster, and I've also bought DLC packs for fighting games, so I really can't stand on a higher ground and say that these are really some kind of scourge that's ruining gaming, because why is gaming this holier-than-thou privilege that people think can't be tainted by shady practices? Greedy cutthroat deals have always been a part of the game industry if anyone knows their history. Now, depending on your view of sports games, this one either takes the piss or you're still completely fine with it. Sega raised the bar with its Dreamcast sports titles, and EA and Sony know what they have to beat. Both publishers are creating new sports games for the PS2's US launch, and you can bet they'll have some new things that we've never imagined. Yeah, like delivering a giant truck of money to the NFL. Visually, however, the games did improve. This will be the most significant upgrade. Players will look nearly identical to their real-life counterparts. Stadiums will be insanely detailed and packed with realistic fans. We may even see cheerleaders on the sidelines.
Hi, I'm Tracy with the Baltimore Ravens. EA Sports, it's in the game.
Okay, I'll be fair, they added them eventually. and took them back out and put them back in. I think. I don't know. Control was another one of the things that sports games really improved on, especially with physics. Analog buttons will have a major effect on sports games. For instance, in football, you can control how hard the quarterback throws the ball, how tight the receiver cuts to avoid a defender, and how far he tries to stretch the ball forward when he's being tackled. Again, one of those things that I don't know if Madden eventually did that or not, but I totally remember the 2K sports games including those. Even that all-pro football game that they had more features than some of the later Madden entries in the late aughts. The projection on online play, it's still fairly accurate, although it does get a little bit wah-wah at the end. Sports games will change forever if they take full advantage of Sony's broadband network. Imagine the possibilities. Joining a pickup game, forming a league, watching a real updated 10-minute ticker and live PS2 sport events that you could even attend as a spectator, buy an e-ticket and sit in the stands.
How about no?
No, absolutely not. Finally, every player on the field, plus the coach, could be controlled by real people all over the world. That's kind of stretching it a bit. I can't really imagine somebody signing up for that. Like, who would want to do that? That doesn't sound fun at all. Maybe being the coach is one thing, or maybe if you're run with a squad, a 10v10 matchup or whatever could be kind of entertaining. But who's going to be an NPC? And while I kind of mock the e-ticket thing, I mean, that's kind of what you end up paying for with like a Twitch subscription service. I mean, if you want to speak in someone's chat, that is. I really am trying to keep this as concise as possible, but the role-playing section is just full of things that I just gotta talk about. In graphics, for instance, you won't have to always be taken out of the game environment for an FMV movie, because the real-time gameplay will look just as good. This will allow developers to include more story scenes because they won't have to render them as expensive movies.
And cutscenes would be a stubborn nuisance in video games until the end of time.
Hell, even midway through the PlayStation 1's lifespan, I was kind of sick of them. Control. Square's already discussed one way the new analog controller will improve RPG gaming. Imagine that you've been asked to go on a quest. If you answer yes with a light tap of the button, your response will be taken as wishy-washy. But if you answer with a firm press of the button, your response will be a yeah! Leaving no doubt how you feel. Okay, I think that's a little bizarre. I mean, it's kind of a nice cosmetic, I guess, but I don't really feel that that's all too necessary. Just kind of provide somebody with organic choices, like the way Alpha Protocol did, the game that everybody hated.
I saw what happened at the warehouse on the news. There wasn't any reports of you being taken into custody, though, so I wasn't sure what had happened.
They spotted me at the warehouse, so I had to think quickly. I got the intel I needed, but it made getting out a lot harder.
Are you hurt?
No. Just need to get my second wind.
While the traditional story-driven RPG won't go away, you'll eventually see plenty of online-only RPGs on the PS2. Thanks to the broadband network, you could find yourself deep in an unknown land with plenty of adventurers from all over the world. So, Monster Hunter. And then there's commerce. You want a really big Price is Right fail-horn? Get a load of this! First off, you could purchase and sell magical items. For instance, you could go to a store in the game world, lay down your Visa card number, and purchase a rare magic weapon. In an online-only RPG, you could build and sell characters, or purchase special items from fellow players in the game. Items and characters from PC online RPGs are already hot properties on eBay, an internet auction site. So that's a good thing? You want me to pay for Phoenix Downs and tinctures with actual money? No! That would completely devalue the purpose of in-game currency, or this Sorry, every time I read that, that makes my head explode. They're sitting here talking about the value of actual money in regards to a fictional video game. There's absolutely no way that that would pay off in the long term. You want to talk about highway robbery? If this idea actually came into place, you're asking for Pandora's box. Hell, Pandora's box has already been opened, but we were salivating about it here in the year 1999. I'll stop now. This this just broke me. If voice recognition, using the headset, you'll eventually be able to talk to in-game characters and they'll be able to respond. At first, this will simply involve a small menu of pre-selected commands, but this feature will expand greatly as time goes on. This technology will make RPGs much more immersive, even on a simple conversational level. It kind of sounds like a lot of work, mate. I don't really think that that would change the game all that much. I feel like that you'd inadvertently make it very clunky and gimmicky. I mean, I'm all for looking for ways to make games progressive, and perhaps somebody will try something that maybe something like that already exists, but I don't really think that that would change the aspect of the game. I just feel like it would make it more task heavy. It'd be pretty task oriented. Not really something that I would think would completely overhaul the landscape. You generally just kind of want to press X, get your yes or no, and get your information. I think holding an actual conversation with an AI will drive you insane. When it came to fighting games, the focus seemed primarily on what was assumed to be a projected full-fledged leap into arena fighters. Following games like Bushido Blade and Power Stone, I thought at the time I wouldn't have minded seeing more games of that nature. That didn't last long. Well, we got many of them, but some of the results were questionable at best, boring at worst. Fighting games didn't really grow up much since the launch of the PlayStation. Yeah, many of them moved to 3D, and Capcom added a few new twists to its 2D fighters, but we'll begin to see some real changes when the PlayStation 2 arrives. Nope, you people had your chance to embrace that with Bushido Blade, but you didn't like one-hit kills because you don't know how to play defense, and now you gotta live with that. Yes, characters will look better, and environments will improve, but that's obvious. The PlayStation 2 will be able to render large numbers of fighters at a time, which could change fighting games forever. Imagine massive 64-player brawls, yeah no, or if you rather, simple 2-player fights, where each player looks and moves almost exactly the way they would in real life. Once you figure out how to beat the computer characters, the best action with a fighting game is playing against real people. The broadband network would enable gamers to jump online at any time to fight against real people and join massive tournaments.
Nah, I'ma just play Guilty Gear.
I remember being in a cold sweat reading this portion. Many fighting fans will cringe at this. Remember how that the PS2 pad supports both analog and digital button commands, but the DualShock 2 will enable the player to choose the strength and style of their attack with button pressure. In the past, special moves consisted of button combinations, but with the PS2 you could have special attacks be the result of carefully practiced button pressures. This kind of control could revolutionize 3D movement in fighting games. Yeah, no thanks. I'm gonna keep my input commands. If a company created a fighting game that let players create and master their own fighting styles, you could use online commerce to purchase new moves, weapons, and powers.
Oh, don't you dare give them the idea to put critical arts and unblockables behind a paywall. Dojo fees? Why dojo fees? Just join a lobby and get your ass kicked for 4 hours.
Fighting games are perfect for trash talking. Lighting up an online opponent with a dragon punch is bad enough, but yelling "Sure you can" in his ear at the same time is just plain humiliating.
No, that would be humiliating for the winner, Dweebenheimer.
Now, to PSM's credit, I think that most of the boxes were checked in this genre faster than others, especially in like the first-person shooter and survival horror. Just think about the leaps in gameplay that were introduced to us in such classics as Tomb Raider, Metal Gear Solid, and the Resident Evil series, and you'll see how these games could use the horsepower of the PlayStation 2 to wow us even more. Developers could create an endless amount of gameplay possibilities using analog buttons, such as a puzzle that requires you to push a delicate box without breaking it, or other tests that would require pressure-sensitive skills. Plus, pressure-sensitive jumps and movements would be of great use when you want to get Lara leaping or Solid Snake sneaking, and 12 Lords a-leaping. You'll also see more use of both analog sticks. Just look at one thing that the developer of Munch's Odyssey is planning. When you start the game, your character is in a wheelchair. Each analog stick controls one of its arms, and you'll move him by moving the sticks in rhythm.
Not really a lot of games utilize the pressure-sensitive buttons as much as I thought that they would, with the exception of Metal Gear Solid Sons of Liberty and lightly holding down the square button causing you to aim aim your pistol and pressing it a little harder to fire it. Not really many games come to mind, but that didn't stop a lot of them from achieving success, like Devil May Cry or Kingdom Hearts.
Two major things come to mind when we talk about online play: team play and mission building. You could call a few of your buddies and have them join you in a game online that you download. Together, you could raid a well-guarded government installation that is impossible to infiltrate alone. Best of all, your PlayStation 2 is connected to the internet. It would be able to reach you wherever you are. Yes, that means phone calls, pages, and even emails. You could be sitting at work when you get a phone call with the message, "Snake, we need you!" Yeah, if you could let that base die and lose the raid until I get those TPS reports, that would be great.
I mean, some of those would become fixtures today where people can like chat on Discord or Messenger, or I don't know if you can chat on the PlayStation app or not. But or just like in-game chatter, but that's something that would become a normalcy. I'm just glad I never really had a squad.
Nowadays, and probably by the mid-2000s, online play really became the cornerstone of action games because I feel like that the AI wasn't quite there yet, despite the promises. With all the extra horsepower of the PS2, we'll finally start seeing some realistic bad guys. Right now, it's pretty much simple to outsmart them, but what would it be like if they could hear you before they see you, and set traps and ambush you when you least expect it? Developers would be able to create massive worlds that are populated with bad guys who go about their business and react to what you do depending on the situation. Scum! Yeah, not really. I feel like that for the longest time throughout the 6th and 7th generation, enemies were pretty easy to stump. Even a game like Crysis, which was supposed to have even smarter enemies, or like more intelligent infantry, I still found that after a while they were pretty easy to stump. They probably had maybe one or two different layers of countermeasures, like if you turtled, but beyond that, it was pretty easy to get around them. Maybe the Dark Souls games, and there's divisive opinions about that, and I still don't really consider it much of the end-all be-all, but I gotta give credit where it's due. They really do make you think about how you approach your enemies. It's about how sharp you are with your parries, as well as your ability to play defensively. Yeah, there's still probably a set number of patterns, but it really is more about how you attack rather than why you'd attack. It really is a time like this where the world misses a good substantial Castlevania game. Not really talking about that Lords of Shadow stuff either. Taking an interesting look into memory lane here, it really teaches a lot about how far gaming has advanced, along with how much in some ways a lot of the core things that would make video games entertaining, be it visuals, story, stimulating gameplay, a respectable challenge, a lot of the things that were promised in this issue weren't necessarily needed to make games better. They could certainly augment parts of its experience and certainly give it a little more nuanced and a little more flair. But in the end, when you look at how consoles and the hardware tries to experiment with things, it all resorts back to the same thing. As long as you make the games substantial, quality, I think people will gravitate more towards that than flashy gimmicks. The PlayStation 2 was not the most powerful console ever made, but it was popular because it had accessibility. It was widely known and it had a very broad reach to it. There was virtually anything on the genre that you can find to play on it, be it sports games, RPGs, action games. You were never really at a shortage for things to find on the PlayStation 2, and from that point, games were catapulted into the norm of society nowadays. It's pretty hard to find people who really aren't adverse to video games, or at least know a little bit about them. And through that, I feel like that was the PlayStation 2's greatest contribution. Well, that and being a DVD player duct taped to a video game console. But I digress. The rise of independent developers who have managed to make some of the more interesting and highest replayed valued games of probably the last decade didn't really need a lot of the gimmicks. I think that perhaps one of the greatest things that I've learned while reading this is that while there's nothing wrong with shooting for the stars with game technology or game hardware and software, it's sometimes more prudent, smarter, and maybe even a little more progressive to think about taking the things we already know and flourishing them out. Because with a little bit of creativity and nuance, something that's even familiar can always feel new again. I'll be posting PS2 The Next Level, the full article, on my Burned Retinas WordPress site. I used to do things on there. If you want to read this article in its entirety, I'll have a link in the description when it's up. And with that, I bid you adieu.